Abraham Shakespeare's story did not begin with riches, far from it. He was born in Lakeland, Florida, a place of sunshine and orange groves. But, his life was not always sunny. He grew up in a world of struggle where every day was a challenge. Education was difficult for him. He dropped out of school in the 7th grade. He could not read or write very well, and that made finding steady work really hard. He did what he could, working odd jobs, often as a manual laborer. He was a truck driver's assistant, a job that required strength, not a formal education. It was a tough life, a life lived from one paycheck to the next. His early years were also marked by trouble with the law. He had a criminal record with arrests for things like burglary and non-payment of child support. These were not the crimes of a hardened gangster, but of a man struggling to get by. He was a man caught in a cycle of poverty, just trying to survive in a world that seemed to have dealt him a difficult hand. People who knew him said he wasn't a bad person. He was just a man who made mistakes, a man who was trying to find his way. His past was a heavy burden, a constant reminder of his struggles. Despite these challenges, Abraham was known for his kind heart. He was a simple man. He didn't ask for much. He just wanted a little peace, a little security. He had a family, including a mother he cared for deeply. He also had 2 sons. He wanted to be a better father to them than his circumstances allowed. His inability to consistently provide for them was a source of great pain for him. He was a man with a good soul, trapped in a difficult life. Friends would later say he was too trusting, too quick to believe the best in people. This quality, while admirable, would later prove to be his undoing. Life in Lakeland was a constant grind. The Florida heat was relentless, and so were the bills. Abraham often found himself with little to no money. He lived in a modest home with his mother. He relied on the kindness of friends and the hope that one day, things would change. He was not a man of big plans or grand ambitions. His dreams were simple: to pay his bills, to help his family, and to find a little bit of comfort. He was just another face in the crowd, another person working hard and hoping for a lucky break. No one could have imagined the break that was coming his way. Before the lottery, Abraham Shakespeare was a father. He had 2 sons, and his relationship with them was complicated by his poverty. He wanted to give them everything. He wanted to be the kind of dad who could buy them new shoes or take them on vacation. But his reality was very different. He struggled to make child support payments. This wasn't because he didn't care, it was because he often didn't have the money. This failure weighed on him heavily. He loved his children and dreamed of a day when he could provide for them without worry, a day when he could be the hero in their eyes. His dreams were not of mansions or fancy cars. They were much simpler, much more human. He dreamed of owning a home. He wanted a place where his family could be safe and comfortable. He imagined a life without the constant stress of debt collectors and overdue notices. He talked about starting a business, maybe something small that could provide a steady income. He wanted to help his mother, who had stood by him through all his troubles. He wanted to give back to the community that he called home. His dreams were about security and the ability to be generous, things that had always been just out of his reach. The job he had before his life changed was as a helper for a truck driver. His co-worker was Michael Ford. They would travel together, loading and unloading goods. It was hard, physical work. On one of their trips to Miami, they stopped at a convenience store. Michael Ford asked Abraham to buy 2 lottery tickets for him. Abraham agreed. He reached into his pocket and bought the tickets. It was a small act, a simple favor for a friend. He didn't think much of it. It was just another lottery ticket, another piece of paper filled with faint hope. Millions of people buy them every day, dreaming of a different life. That small act, that purchase of a lottery ticket, was the pivot on which his entire life would turn. He held onto the tickets, one for his friend and one that he had bought for himself. The dream of winning was a distant fantasy, something that happened to other people in other towns. For Abraham, the reality was the long road back to Lakeland, the sore muscles from a day's work, and the familiar worry about how to make ends meet. The dream of a better tomorrow felt as far away as ever. But fate, as it sometimes does, had a very different plan in store for him. The day was November 15, 2006. The numbers for the Florida lottery were drawn, and one ticket sold at that small convenience store in Miami was a winner. The jackpot was a staggering $30 million. For a while, no one came forward to claim the prize. The winning ticket was a mystery. Then, Abraham Shakespeare stepped into the light. He was the winner. He had the ticket. But there was a problem. His co-worker, Michael Ford, claimed the ticket was his. Ford said Abraham had stolen it from his wallet. A legal battle began. It was the first sign that this money would bring more trouble than joy. The court case was stressful for Abraham. He was a simple man, unaccustomed to lawyers and legal fights. He maintained that he had bought the ticket for himself. In the end, the jury believed him. They decided the ticket belonged to Abraham Shakespeare. He chose to take the winnings as a lump sum. After taxes, he received a check for nearly $17 million. Suddenly, a man who could barely read or write was a multi-millionaire. The news spread like wildfire through Lakeland. Abraham Shakespeare, the man everyone knew from the neighborhood, was rich. His life had changed overnight in the most dramatic way possible. His first instinct was not to hoard the money, it was to share it. Abraham had a heart as big as his new bank account. He started giving money away almost immediately. He bought a new home for himself, $1 million property in a gated community. He bought a nice car, but he also paid off the mortgage on his mother's house. He gave money to his friends, his relatives, and sometimes to complete strangers. If someone came to him with a sad story, he would open his wallet. He was known to just hand out cash to people he met on the street. He wanted to use his good fortune to help others. This generosity became his defining feature. He was the people's lottery winner. He loaned money to friends to start businesses. He donated to his local church. He paid for funerals for families who couldn't afford them. People said he was too generous, too naive. He saw his wealth as a blessing to be shared. He didn't understand the complexities of managing such a large amount of money. He only understood the joy of being able to say yes to someone in need. For a man who had known a lifetime of no, this was a powerful feeling. But this open-handed kindness would soon attract the wrong kind of attention. The news of Abraham's wealth created a new kind of poverty for him, a poverty of peace. His phone never stopped ringing. People started showing up at his new expensive house at all hours of the day and night. They were not friends or family. They were strangers, all with a story, all with a handout. Each person had a desperate need, a business idea, or a sob story. Abraham, with his kind and trusting nature, found it impossible to turn them away. He felt their pain. He had been in their shoes, so he gave, and he gave, and he gave. The line of people asking for money never seemed to end. This constant pressure began to wear him down. He told his family that the money was a curse. He wished he had never won. The joy of his good fortune was gone, replaced by stress and fear. He couldn't trust anyone. Was this person being friendly because they liked him, or because they wanted his money? The question haunted him. He became paranoid. He started to carry a gun for protection. The simple man from Lakeland was now a prisoner in his own $1 million home. The dream had become a nightmare, and he couldn't wake up. His generosity was costing him dearly. Financial experts estimate that he gave away millions of dollars in just a couple of years. He had no plan, no advisors, just a big heart and a checkbook. He was an easy target for anyone with a convincing story. The relationships in his life became strained. Family members argued over the money. Old friends felt entitled to a piece of his fortune. The wealth that was supposed to solve all his problems had only created new, more complicated ones. He was losing his money, and he was losing himself in the process. He grew tired of the constant requests. He once told a reporter, "I'd have been better off broke." The sentiment was shocking, but for Abraham, it was true. When he was poor, his life was hard, but it was simple. He knew who his real friends were. Now, he was surrounded by people, but he felt more alone than ever. He longed for the quiet life he once had. He wanted to disappear, to escape the crushing weight of his own fortune. The man who had everything felt like he had nothing left to lose. He was looking for an escape, a way out of the chaos his life had become. In the midst of all this chaos, a new person entered Abraham's life. Her name was Doris Moore, but everyone called her DD. She approached him with a business proposition, saying she wanted to write a book about his life. DD presented herself as someone who could help him, someone who could, protect him from all the people who wanted to take his money. DD was smart, confident, and honestly really persuasive. To a man like Abraham, who was overwhelmed and unable to read complex documents, she seemed like a savior. He was looking for someone to trust, and DD played the part perfectly. Pretty quickly, DD took control of Abraham's world. She told him she would manage his finances. She created a business called Abraham Shakespeare LLC and convinced him to transfer his remaining assets into its control. This gave her complete power over his money and his properties, including his $1 million home. She became his gatekeeper, deciding who could see him and who could talk to him. She told his friends and family that he was tired of them, that he wanted to be left alone. Dee isolated Abraham, cutting him off from the people who truly cared about him. To the outside world, Dee was Abraham's trusted advisor, his spokesperson, his business partner. But behind the scenes, a very different story was unfolding. She began spending his money lavishly, buying a Hummer, a Corvette, and a truck. She went on expensive vacations, all paid for with Abraham's money. While she was living a life of luxury, Abraham was given only a small allowance. The millionaire was now living on just a few dollars a day, completely dependent on the woman who claimed she was helping him. Abraham's family and friends started to grow suspicious. They couldn't reach him. Whenever they tried, Dee would come up with excuses. She'd say he was sick, or that he'd gone on a trip to Jamaica or Puerto Rico. She even used Abraham's phone to send text messages to his loved ones, pretending to be him, telling them he was fine and just wanted to be left alone. But you know, the people who knew Abraham best could tell something was wrong. The man they knew would never abandon his family. He would never just disappear. The fear for his safety grew with each passing day. The last time anyone in Abraham's family saw him alive was in April 2009. After that, he simply vanished. His mother, Elizabeth Walker, was worried sick. It was just not like her son to go for weeks without calling. She tried his phone again and again, but he never answered. When she asked Dee Moore where he was, the stories kept changing. First he was in Orlando, then he was in Texas, then he was out of the country. The excuses were confusing and contradictory. Elizabeth knew in her heart that something terrible had happened to her son. Dee Moore worked hard to create the illusion that Abraham was still alive and well. She used his cell phone to send text messages to his family. In one message, supposedly from Abraham, he told his mother, "I'm fine." But the language didn't sound like him. He was a man who could barely write, yet the messages were written clearly. In another instance, Dee paid one of Abraham's relatives to call his mother and pretend to be him, saying he was okay. It was a cruel deception, designed to keep the police from getting involved, and to keep her in control of his money. The deception went even further. Dee found a man who resembled Abraham and tried to convince him to pose as the missing millionaire. She wanted him to make public appearances to stop the questions. The man refused. Dee also tried to bribe people. She offered one of Abraham's friends a house if he would lie to the police and say he had recently seen Abraham. Her actions became more and more desperate. She was trying to plug the holes in a story that was falling apart. The mystery of the vanishing man was deepening, and all roads seemed to lead back to Dee Moore. Finally, in November 2009, after months of worry and suspicion, one of Abraham's relatives went to the police and filed a missing person report. The official investigation began. The sheriff's office in Polk County started asking questions. They wanted to talk to Abraham Shakespeare, but the only person who seemed to know where he was Dee Moore. And her stories were not adding up. The search for the missing millionaire was now a serious police matter. The whole community of Lakeland was watching, waiting, and fearing the worst. The police investigation quickly focused on Dee Moore. Her stories about Abraham's whereabouts were inconsistent. She told detectives he was tired of the attention and had run away to a remote island, but her actions told a different story. She was selling his assets, including his expensive home and his luxury cars. She was living a high life on his dime. To prove Abraham was alive, she even took a detective to a neighborhood and claimed Abraham was living there. But she couldn't point out the house. Her web of lies was beginning to unravel under the pressure of the investigation. Detectives decided to use a clever tactic. They set up an undercover operation. An officer, pretending to be a criminal associate, befriended Dee. He told her he could help her with her problems. In secretly recorded conversations, Dee's story began to emerge. She told the undercover officer that she knew where Abraham was buried. She claimed that drug dealers had killed him. She asked the officer to help her move the body and to find someone to take the blame for the murder. She even drew him a map showing exactly where to find the body. On January 25, 2010, armed with this information, investigators went to a home that Dee had recently purchased. It was the home of her ex-boyfriend. In the backyard, they found a large, freshly poured concrete slab. They began to dig. Underneath 30 feet of dirt and concrete, they found what they were looking for. It was the body of Abraham Shakespeare. He had been shot twice in the chest. The gentle giant, the kind-hearted lottery winner, was dead. He had been murdered and buried like a piece of trash. The search was over. The tragic truth was finally revealed. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community. The man who had dreamed of a better life had met a violent end. The mystery of his disappearance was solved, but a new, darker chapter had begun. The investigation now turned from a missing person case to a homicide, and there was only one suspect. The woman who had promised to protect Abraham Shakespeare was now accused of his murder. D.D. Moore was arrested and charged. The stage was set for a trial that would capture the nation's attention, a story of greed, betrayal, and cold-blooded murder. The trial of D.D. Moore began in 2012. It was a media sensation. The courtroom was packed with reporters and curious onlookers. The prosecution painted a picture of a cold, calculating woman driven by greed. They argued that D.D. had systematically taken control of Abraham's life and his fortune. They presented evidence of her lavish spending after he disappeared. They showed the jury the bank records, the property deeds, and the titles to the luxury cars, all of which she had put in her name. They argued that she had a multi-million-dollar motive for murder. The prosecution's case was built on a mountain of evidence. They played the secret recordings from the undercover operation. The jury heard D.D.'s own voice talking about the murder and the location of the body. They heard her trying to orchestrate a cover-up. Witnesses, including her ex-boyfriend, testified that she had used his backhoe to dig the hole where Abraham was buried. They presented the gun that was used to kill him, which had been found near the crime scene. The evidence was overwhelming, pointing directly at D.D. Moore as the person responsible for Abraham's death. D.D.'s defense team tried to create doubt. They argued that she was not the killer. They claimed that drug dealers were the real culprits, and that D.D. was just a scared woman who was forced to help cover up the crime. D.D. herself took the stand in her own defense. Her testimony was dramatic and often chaotic. She cried, she yelled, and she pointed fingers at everyone else. She claimed she was trying to protect Abraham's children. Her performance was unconvincing. The jury saw through the act. Her stories were inconsistent and contradicted the evidence. The most powerful voice in the courtroom was not heard live. It was the voice of Abraham Shakespeare, speaking through the memories of his loved ones. His mother, Elizabeth Walker, testified about the last time she saw her son and her desperate search for him. Her pain was real and heartbreaking. The jury saw the human cost of this terrible crime. They saw a simple, kind man who was taken advantage of and ultimately murdered for his money. The prosecution's final argument was simple. D.D. Moore befriended Abraham, stole his money, and then killed him to make sure he could never tell anyone. After a trial that lasted for weeks, the jury did not take long to reach a verdict. They found D.D. Moore guilty of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced her to life in prison without the possibility of parole. She was also given an additional sentence for using a gun during the crime. As the verdict was read, D.D. showed little emotion. The woman who had charmed her way into a millionaire's life and then brutally ended it was finally brought to justice. For Abraham's family, it was not a moment of celebration, but of solemn relief. Justice had been served, but it would not bring Abraham back. Even from behind bars, D.D. Moore continues to claim she is innocent. She has given interviews from prison, spinning new theories and blaming others for the crime. She has filed appeals, all of which have been denied. She maintains that she was a victim, not a killer. She writes letters to reporters and television producers hoping someone will believe her story. But the evidence against her is too strong. She remains in a Florida prison, a place far from the luxury lifestyle she stole from Abraham Shakespeare. She is a convicted murderer, forever known as the lottery killer. The tragic tale of Abraham Shakespeare serves as a powerful warning. It has become a case study for lottery organizations and financial advisors. They use his story to teach new winners about the dangers of sudden wealth. The advice is clear. Get a team of trusted professionals, including a lawyer and a financial planner, before you even claim the prize. Stay anonymous if possible. Learn to say no. Abraham's story shows that without a plan, a lottery win can be a curse rather than a blessing. It highlights the dark side of human nature and the greed that can be unleashed by a massive fortune. In Lakeland, Florida, Abraham Shakespeare is not forgotten. He is remembered as a man whose dreams came true, only to be stolen from him. His story has been told in documentaries, television shows, and books, It's a modern-day tragedy, a tale of rags to riches to ruin. It reminds the community of the gentle, trusting man who just wanted to help people. His legacy is one of caution, a sad reminder that the love of money can be the root of all evil. And for anyone who buys a lottery ticket, his story whispers a quiet warning about the price of a dream come true.